This is the S1S Podcast, Episode 4.
The Stage 1 Startup Podcast is launching in T-minus 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1, 0. Prepare for liftoff.
Welcome to the Stage 1 Startup Podcast for startups and aspiring entrepreneurs to find out what it takes to launch any business idea from stage 1 to success. Now, for your hosts, live from the UK, Nichols and Morley.
Hello and welcome to episode 4. I cannot believe that we're on episode 4 already. Time is just flying with these episodes. We've got so much more to come. What do you reckon, Brad?
100%, man. I'm absolutely loving it so far.
Good. Okay, so today on the show we have another amazing guest, should I say. We are using one of his tools religiously at the minute, and we think that our listeners will hugely benefit. Brad, are you excited for today's episode?
I've been excited since the minute I woke up. I literally jumped out of bed out of excitement.
I think that's our signature intro right there, you know. How excited are you right now, Brad?
How excited am I right now? I would say I'm a 12 out of 10.
Oh, a 12. Jesus, cool.
It's never going to be under 10.
Brad, if you want to take us over to the intro for today's guest so that our listeners can know a little bit more about who they're going to be listening to for the next hour or so.
For sure, let's do this. Today we have the pleasure of bringing to the show Chris Gimmer, who is the co-founder of Snapper. Snapper is the easiest graphic design tool you will ever use. It focuses on helping marketers and small business owners create highly engaging images without the help of a graphic designer. Chris has not always been the entrepreneurial type, especially through his years of growing up. But there came a time where he realised there was more to life than crunching numbers all day every day in a job he shared no interest in. After taking some time out to travel to some exotic places around the world, he decided it was time to create something he was passionate about. Chris's first project he launched with his business partner Mark, who is also the co-founder of Snapper, was a student dating website called Classmate Catch. They managed to acquire over 1,000 users in their first 3 months, but had difficulty in scaling the business. In 2014, Chris and Mark decided to use what they had learned through the startup stages to create their next venture, that being Bootstrap Bay, which was a marketplace for premium Bootstrap themes and templates. These boys were able to grow this business to 10k a month in revenue just 6 months after launching. You'd think that was enough for the two, but of course it wasn't. They knew there was still something missing. The pair hit a brick wall when they realised it was just way too difficult for marketers like themselves to create highly engaging images for blog posts, social media and online ads. So in 2015, the pair started building what we now know as Snapper. Now Chris, I could go on about your journey as an entrepreneur and Snapper and its amazing features, but I think it would be so much better coming from the creator himself. So please welcome Chris to the show. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm doing really good. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. That's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining us. So Chris, I've obviously summed up a bit about your background there. I've not really focused so much on Snapper itself and the journey because I thought it'd be better coming from you. So can you just tell us and the S1S listeners a bit more about yourself and the amazing Snapper and its journey since birth?
Yeah, so that's pretty good background. I went to school, went to university, and my background is actually in finance and accounting. And I did that for about 5 years after school. And, I just pretty much got bored of it, really. And I had the fortunes of meeting Mark, who's now my co-founder, and he was a developer. So we were like the only people under the age of 30 at the time who were kind of working in our office. Everyone was kind of older. And so we quickly became pretty good friends. And so when I saw what he can build, with his development skills, I was just kind of really blown away. And that's when I kind of started thinking about the possibility of, teaming up and starting an online business. So yeah, the first thing we built was Classmate Catch, which was the student dating website. And there's, a ton of lessons learned, which I'm sure we'll get into. And that one didn't go so well, but, we learned a lot of stuff along the way. And the next business that kind of got off the ground was Bootstrap Bay, and we grew that primarily through content marketing and SEO and learning some of the marketing skills, that we put into practice. And then while we're running that business, that's when, we kind of had the idea and the itch to grow Snappa, because we realized that marketers like myself who was doing content marketing and, updating social media pages, it was very difficult to have some nice looking graphics without either learning a tool like Photoshop or having to spend a lot of money on a graphic designer. So that's kind of where I am today, is just, building out Snappa.
Because tools like Canva and Photoshop, they're a little bit tricky to use, aren't they? So is that one of the reasons as to why, or kind of what inspired you with Snappa, was to just create something that was simple and easy for users to use?
Yeah, so essentially, at that time when I was writing blog posts and I was trying to create these images, when I looked at, because I figure, okay, there's got to be some kind of product, around there at this point with so many apps being created now. And what I found was, the apps that were created basically fell into two categories. So you had, apps that were either had a lot of functionality but were really complicated to use.
Like Photoshop?
Yeah, exactly. And then you had apps that were easy to use but just not enough functionality to the point where, you can just kind of slap text onto a background image, but that was kind of all you can do. You couldn't really do anything beyond that. So essentially, my vision, or our vision for Snappa, was to kind of create a tool that was in the middle, where it was both really easy to use but also gave you enough functionality where you can create some really cool stuff.
Yeah, awesome. And it literally is, so easy to use. Literally, there's some websites and apps that you use and you need a full set of instructions to actually work the things. I've certainly struggled with the likes of Canva, but with Snappa, it's literally just from the click straight away. Everything is just there. It's just, it's just.
I think
so
the best.
easy.
Just to big Snappa up even more, I think one of the best features for me, and this is a simple feature that quite a lot of other online graphics tools don't necessarily do, is the size resolution for online images. That is really helpful, rather than having to go to Google and type in size resolutions for Instagram.
Oh yeah, I know what you mean.
Do you know what I mean? Whereas Snappa, it's just there and everything's ready to rock and roll as soon as you create your login. So yeah, kudos to that. It's brilliant.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Just small things like that where, like a tool like Photoshop, they're not trying to please, content marketers. They're trying to make graphic design accessible to real designers. And so there's, all kinds of features like that where we realize that, our market essentially wasn't being served, and that there is, these little features that we can put in that would make our target audience's lives just that much easier.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And for anyone that, wants to check out this sort of thing, even if you look at our Instagram page, pretty much every image that's posted on there is used from Snappa, so you can literally see the kind of qualities that come with it. Even the snaps. It's not just Snappa though, is it, Chris? Haven't you got a stock snap which is like linked to it?
Yeah, so that's basically the stock photo site that we run, where we curate and also get submissions for Creative Commons royalty-free photos. And so that's one of the huge value adds of our service as well, is, we have this huge library of beautiful free stock photos directly, integrated in Snappa. So you can search for a photo, edit it right there on the spot, and then, save it or download it or share it on social. Whereas previously you would have to kind of do that all outside of your graphic design program. You'd have to, go to a bunch of websites, find photos, download them, upload them into Photoshop, and then start working on them. So that's another thing that we saw was a huge value add.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's what is so easy about using Snappa. It's got everything there that you need to use. And another thing I love about Snappa again is some people might ask, it's not the actual creating the images that I'm struggling with, but it's the inspiration as to what images I should be creating. How do I create an image that stands out? And I think that's where it's good, because for the likes of, if you literally go to the option in Snappa that says create graphic and click on, I don't know, whether you're posting an Instagram picture, you've already pre-made a load of sample templates that people can use, haven't you?
Yeah. So when we first launched our beta, the templates was one of the number one things that we had gotten in terms of feedback, because some people just as a marketer, you're not really a designer or a small business owner, you kind of don't know where to begin. So with all of the pre-designed templates that we have, it kind of just alleviates that issue of staring at a blank canvas and not knowing where to begin. So you at least have a really good starting point where now it's just a matter of, swapping out the colors and the background image and the text. And that's a lot easier than just completely designing from scratch.
Yeah, it's great for inspiration if you're just stuck with, what to design. Like you said, you can simply just use one of the pre-made ones and just change the colors, change the text, change the format of it slightly, and you've created an image that stands out and will almost guarantee you some sort of positive feedback on whatever platform that they're being used on, which is one of many, by the way.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Brilliant. So, Chris, thanks for a great introduction there. Everyone we'll put all the links in the show notes so everybody knows where to go, and we'll come back to this at a later stage. We're going to dive into the questions, which Greg's going to run off. Just one more question before we jump into that. Like all business owners, we all tend to create a plan for growth for our business over the coming years. So can you tell us if you've got any plans for Snapper in terms of revenue targets or anything like that you've got for the coming years?
Yeah, so the way that we kind of handle our marketing and growth is we kind of do like sprints, and we identify potential channels, and then we like to test them. So a really good book on the subject is called Traction. And essentially they kind of go over like 19 different marketing channels, and they kind of put together a framework for how to test those. And so that's kind of what I do, because I find to get the best results is to really focus on one thing and just really double down on it. Whereas if you're trying to do like 5 to 10 different things at once, it just doesn't really work very well. So that's kind of how we approach things, is like I kind of have a backlog of like ideas or things that I want to try to help grow. And then what we look for is like scalable, marketing strategies, so that if it does work, then you can kind of scale that up, and then we move on to the next one. So one thing that we're kind of investing in right now is going to be SEO, and trying to rank for certain keywords for the different types of images that you can create in Snappa.
That's amazing. So there's some big plans that you've got coming up then.
Yeah, so I mean, product-wise, we have we've kind of have a roadmap at least for the next 3 to 6 months. And actually, what I'm doing, this month is actually getting on a call with a lot of our customers to really try to understand, what their needs are, what their current process is, exactly, how they're using Snappa, what they're using it for. And that's going to, help set our vision for the next year out, and really how we want to build out the platform and go from there. Because, we have some really cool ideas, but as we've learned in the past, you always want to, validate your assumptions as much as possible. And it really sucks when you build things that no one's actually going to use. So we're definitely trying to avoid that as much as possible.
I don't think you're going to have a problem with that one, to be fair.
I actually remember going back to an email when we first started using it and emailing and thinking, what I could really do with some social media buttons on this platform, to like the icons, sort of message you, Chris, any chance you're getting these soon? And you say, yeah, I heard this from a few of our people. We're working on it. And I think literally about a week later, you were straight away on it. So it's always good that you guys are so easy to connect with as well, because there's a lot of people that, they might want things or to find out some things from behind the scenes, but they don't actually get the answers. But you guys are obviously really efficient with that.
Yeah. So, I mean, everyone who signs up to Snappa will get a welcome email. And I ask, what they're hoping to use Snappa for. And I've actually gotten some really good insights in terms of, how people are using the product or want to use the product. And it also, when you make yourself accessible to the people, I think they're a lot more open to giving you feedback, because, that they know that you're receptive to it. And that's been really huge, is, getting the feedback, and that helps us prioritize, what features are important, what people like really want out of the product. So I think, talking to customers is always, you can never, spend too much time talking to customers, in my opinion.
No, it's just, I think that's just the kind of basics in running a business, isn't it? Is just, focus on the customer and really make the customer service experience, the best it can be, and really put that at the focal point of the business.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Cool. Okay, so at the beginning, Brad gave an awesome intro about your background and everything that you've been doing in the past however many years, and you've gained some epic experience. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into our questions rounds. So our part 1 of the questions will be about you and your journey and sort of tips and advice that you can give to any startup. So our first question for you is, can you pinpoint the moment you realised that Snapper was your thing? Because you had a lot of other ideas before that. So take us back to why you decided to run with it and not any of the others.
Yeah, so going back to kind of this whole piece of talking to customers and validation, like I said, before, was I was experiencing this pain point where as a content marketer, I was writing these blog posts, and I was having issues creating these images, and couldn't find any suitable tools. And so essentially what I did was I talked to other marketers to get a sense of whether they experienced the same problem and how they were solving it. And what I realized was that a lot of people were kind of experiencing the same issues that we did. And so that gave us enough confidence to build, a really initial prototype of Snappa. And so after we built that, initial prototype, we kind of went back to some people and showed them this, and there was definitely some interest there. And then kind of in the third stage, we had kind of built it up to the point where it was like a pretty usable product. And so we started tracking, the usage and adoption and amount of new signups. And we found that people were just really liking the product. People were using it. And at that point, we knew that, we had really solved the problem, and then that this could potentially be a pretty good business. And we were passionate about it. And so that's when we knew that, this was what we wanted to be working on for, the next 5-10 years or for however long.
Perfect. And I think when you're onto that winner, you sort of know, don't you? Like when you've sort of found the perfect sort of direction in where you want to head, you feel it inside and you really know that this is going to be your thing.
Yeah, definitely. And like the business that we were running before that, we were just really trying to build any kind of business to make money that we can quit our jobs. And I'd be lying if I said that, we were really passionate about the last business we were working on. And the problem with that is when you're not passionate about what you're working on, like your results will suffer. And, with Snappa, it was like a completely different experience where like every day we wake up and we're pumped to work on it. Right. So, and that's a good thing to have.
We can certainly relate to you there because we've sort of done the same thing. We've had sort of failed businesses on the way to find our true direction. And although we used to always say, we're really passionate about this, in a sense, it probably didn't work because the passion wasn't there. We just wanted to get the fuck out of our jobs and start living like in our own way, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And like, the thing is, when you're a first-time entrepreneur, like for us at least, like it was the same thing. Like we just wanted to make money and we just wanted to quit our jobs and just want to do it. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But, if you're going at it for 5 years and now you're making money and you've got enough money to cover your needs and whatnot, at some point you're going to be like, I really want to start working on something I enjoy. And that's when I think most entrepreneurs will kind of make that transition to say like, okay, I'm not just doing this for the money, but, it's more important than just the money. So yeah, all that to say is like, I wouldn't discourage, a new entrepreneur from starting a business that makes money, but they're not passionate about, because it's a huge learning experience. There's nothing wrong with that, but at some point you're definitely going to want to find your passion.
Because I suppose that's your sort of your drive and your motivation, and that's what pushes you towards finding your true purpose, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And like when you're starting out, you don't even know what your passion is. You don't know what kind of business you're going to be you're going to want to work on. You don't know, what kind of market you're really going to enjoy. And a lot of that is just trial and errors. And, a lot of people really kind of fall into, their calling or whatnot. So, it's always a journey.
Yeah, I love that. I think like you just said, trial and error, that is probably the main thing. I mean, it's probably better for somebody to actually trial something and it not work, for them to keep trialing until you find what you really want to be doing, isn't it? Because rather than just, not doing it at all because you don't know what your passion is.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Chris, a slightly different one here. Did you have a circle of influence that sort of heavily played an important role with your journey? I mean, this can go for both yourself and Mark. I mean, did you have the sort of people around you that helped you get up to the level you wanted to be at, or was you around a different sort of crowd?
I mean, in the beginning, I really had pretty much zero circle of influence. And a lot of, the learning was through, blog posts and listening to podcasts and reading books and that kind of stuff. And, a lot of people will tell you like, oh, you got a network and you need mentors. But the reality is when you're like a completely new entrepreneur and you don't have that much to offer, it's kind of hard to get a good network. And so what I found throughout my journey was I've kind of always leveled up my network. And what I mean by that is, if I'm at stage 0, I would look for people at stage 1 or 2. I wouldn't go to people in stage 10 because, they're probably not going to want to talk to me. And then once I got to stage, 2 or 3, I would kind of look for people at stage 4 and 5. And so I'm always trying to level up that network. And as I've kind of gained more experience as an entrepreneur, and I've had more value that I could offer to other marketers and give advice and help other people out, that has continuously helped me improve my network as I went. But from day 0, or day 1, I should say, the network was like non-existent.
And I suppose this kind of leads nicely into our next question. Obviously, we know that you're in a partnership with Mark, but, we're a little bit like you. We're a partnership as well. But we always like to know whether it's important for a startup to invest in a mentor. So was that something you decided to do, or, did you and Mark kind of bounce off of each other and use each other as a mentor?
Yeah, so it was really cool having a co-founder in the early going. And again, like, you always have to be careful. But for us, just having someone else to bounce ideas off of. And the other thing, too, was like, I completely underestimated the emotional toll that being an entrepreneur takes on you. And so I almost like view Mark as almost like a semi-therapy. Like, I think we almost give each other like therapeutic sessions where, like I'll calm him down for certain things and he'll calm me down for certain things. And that's helped tremendously. But in terms of like mentorship, if you can't speak to, the top entrepreneur, chances are they've written a book, or they've done a podcast, or they've written a blog post. And so I would highly recommend, without like just spending all your time reading a bunch of content and not taking any action. But I think like in terms of mentorship at the very beginning, there's a lot you can learn from books and podcasts and blog posts and stuff like that. So, I don't want anyone to think that they absolutely need a mentor in order to start a business. It certainly helps, and I would encourage people to. I definitely have people now that I kind of turn to for advice, but, I didn't really have that in the early beginning. That's
good. Well, I think that's good for people to hear, because we get obviously a mixed view from every different type of entrepreneur we have on the show. And I think many of them have said, it's essential. I mean, I suppose in a way it in part depends on the kind of niche you go into. I suppose if you're going into the sort of life coach industry, then I suppose it's probably more relevant. Whereas if you're creating more of a product base, I suppose you focus more on finding out what the potential customers want and using you and Mark to sort of build that together. So yeah, no, it's good to hear a different response for once. So the next question, Chris, we know obviously you've made the transition from an employee to an entrepreneur at one stage. So can you tell us, because there's a lot of people out there that obviously, many of us dream, everyone has that vision of how, that last day in the office must feel before you leave and go solo. So can you just tell us about the transition and your emotions at the time of your last day as an employee?
Yeah, so, I've always been a fairly risk-adverse person, so I would have never been the type to like just quit and start my own thing. So we kind of did it slowly, and we built our business on the side. So so I mean, like nights and weekends, anytime I could, we had some free time, we'd be working on, Bootstrap Bay. And essentially, once we were making enough money where, we could essentially feed ourselves and put a roof over our head, that's when I took a year leave of absence and took the plunge. And so, I definitely took a huge pay cut, but I didn't really care that much because as long as I had enough money to kind of feed myself and live, that's all I really needed. And I had a bit of savings and stuff. So I'm definitely in the camp that I think it's always a great idea to build your startup on the side and, make sure you have some sort of traction and some sort of momentum, because then you're going to be a lot less stressed out, when you do make that transition. So that's how I did it. Not saying, everyone should follow that path, but, it worked for me, and I don't think I would have changed anything if I could go back.
Okay, so when we first put out the question sheet for our target audience to recommend some questions for us, one of the biggest ones that popped up was about family support, because a lot of startups and aspiring entrepreneurs, obviously their family, it kind of ties back to the circle of influence, but their family is always a big part, so was your family supportive of your entrepreneurial journey, or was it difficult to get your point across to them? And if it was difficult, how would you suggest dealing with those closest to you in trying to sort of show them your new entrepreneurial mindset?
Yeah, so I've always had a really good, still do have a really good relationship with my parents. And my family is not really entrepreneurial. They all have good jobs and whatnot. So, it was definitely a challenge initially when, I started kind of talking to them about how I kind of wanted to get into entrepreneurship. And, for me especially, I had a pretty high paying job. I had amazing benefits. I had a good pension plan. So, a lot of them thought I was kind of crazy to throw that away. But, at least what helped for me was when they started realizing that I was actually, making some money out of it. And just, I think they can also see how happy I was and how much more passionate I was about that. The other thing for me that helped, which, not everyone is going to be able to take advantage, but I took a year leave of absence from work. So even though I had zero intentions of going back, I always kind of played that off oh, well, if it doesn't work out, I can just go back. And that seemed to kind of put their mind at ease. But, at the end of the day, you got to do what makes you happy and recognize that family members, especially, they're just looking out for you, and they don't want to see you make a mistake. It's not like they're, gonna just be really pissed off if you leave or whatever. So that's kind of been my experience. And, the more I progress as an entrepreneur, the more and more they've been supportive. And now my parents are super proud of what we've been able to accomplish so far. And they've kind of stopped busting my balls about quitting my good job.
I think that in a sense that's probably the biggest part about it. They want to see proof in a way, isn't it? A lot of they're willing to support you all the way. They don't want to see you make shooting mistakes, but at the same time they want proof of what you're doing is going to be effective, isn't it?
Yeah, keep in mind that our parents' generation, all right, they didn't have the internet, right? So the thought of making money online is probably just so crazy to, our parents' generation. And it was almost like they, I don't think they believe that it could be done, kind of thing. And so once you actually start doing it and they see that, you're actually able to pay yourselves and you're hiring, I remember when we kind of hired our first employee, they're like, really? You hired someone? You're actually running a real business now? It was kind of shocking, right? So I think that it's just such a foreign thing to them that, young kids now can start businesses with zero money and actually, generate full-time incomes. And I think as we progress, and I'm sure by the time we have kids and whatnot, if they start a company at 18 years old, it's not going to be strange, right? And I think we'll be a lot more, at least I know, I would be, very supportive of it. I wouldn't tell them you got to go to school and you got to get a good job. And so I think that societal norms and the way, certain people have grown up plays a big part of it.
I've never actually thought about that, to be fair. It is probably right. Because like you just said, it just made me think back in the day. My nan and granddad, I think, had my mum when they was 17 years old. Can you imagine that now? It's crazy. You are a kid, technically. I mean, for them, it's obviously a different time, like you just said.
Yeah, and the other thing too is like, even like if you go back to your grandparents, like, they were dealing with recessions and stuff like that, and like they were just happy just to have a job, right? So, like now, like quitting your job is it just seems so outlandish because, our parents and our grandparents were probably just fortunate to have jobs, right? So that's kind of been my experience on it.
I think that's just the power of the internet, is the fact that now, like you said, people are able to do some research, find out what they're good at, simply just by going onto the internet and figuring that out for themselves. Whereas in our sort of parents and our grandparents' generation, it took years and years for them to really figure out what their passion was. I think we live in the fortunate time where we can decide what we want to do, whereas their generation was very kind of go out, get a job straight away, work your way up, and just do that every single day. Whereas now, I think we're able to really take our time with it and really figure out what we're passionate about.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
This is one for the listeners. I mean, how many of your grandparents have said to you, on a Sunday evening or a Sunday afternoon, back to work tomorrow, kid? This is what I get. Yeah, back to work tomorrow. Another week, another 65 years of this. Get used to it. I mean, how many times?
That is the
as much as I
worst.
love my granddad, I really want to punch him in the face when he says that. Oh, when he's. But hey,
It was funny when when I started, like after I quit my job and stuff and started working from home, sometimes like my parents would be like, oh, like, can you drive me here? Or like, oh, like your grandmother needs a ride here. And, I had to tell them, like, I still work, like even though I work from home, I still work. It doesn't mean that, I'm sitting in the backyard, like getting my tan on or anything. Right. And so that was also another thing I had to kind of like drill into their heads was, even though I work from home, I still actually work. So I can't just, drive people everywhere and go to doctor's appointments and stuff. So I thought that was kind of funny too.
yeah, I can imagine actually. I could just see it now. It is like that. I mean, sometimes I've been back at home and working, and my mum's like, "Oh, can you help me set up my phone?" And I'm like, "Well, I've actually got a lot of work to do, but yeah, okay, let me help you set up your phone." I just don't think they realise when you're at home, you're at home. A lot of people just don't see it as a workplace, I guess, do they?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so another question that we'd like to ask you, Chris, is, how much time did you invest in building your idea? Or sorry, should I say ideas? Because obviously you've had many. Obviously, Snapper is the one for you at the minute, and what your current your current goal is with Snapper. How much time did you invest into that in the beginning?
Yeah, so with Snappa or the other stuff?
We'll go with Snapper.
Yeah, Snappa. So Snappa was, we put quite a bit of time into it, especially with SaaS products and people are paying you a monthly fee. They're people have pretty high expectations for products nowadays. And so, having said that, with some of the like, for example, the student dating site that we had built, that was like the first thing we'd ever done. And that took like, 3 to 4 months to build, only to find out that it wasn't going to be a viable business. So we were, very cautious not to make that same mistake with Snappa. And that's why we kind of built things in stages. So, we didn't, hide in a garage and build it out for an entire year until it was perfect, which it's never going to be. But we had built that like really, really initial prototype. And I think that took maybe a month or maybe a month or two. And that's when we started showing that to people, and we got some decent responses, even though it was like very early on. And then we kind of built out, kind of like a full beta from there, and we released that back in July. And then again, we just kind of iterated, got more feedback, adding in, the features that we felt were like absolutely necessary. And then a few months after that, we kind of officially launched. So I would say like from idea to kind of official launch was probably about a 6-month process. And, like Mark literally built the whole thing. Like we didn't even have another developer on board yet. And so that's just the trade-off when you're bootstrapping and you're on a small budget, things are going to take longer. And that's why I think it's all the more important to make sure that what you're building is, people are actually going to pay for it, and that you're not going to waste, 6 months of your life for nothing.
Mm. So, I mean, kind of going on the opposite side of things, fast forwarding, how long was it until you started seeing results with Snapper?
Well, with Snapper, we really were kind of seeing results like right away. So with the beta, we were tracking, the amount of downloads and signups and daily activity and stuff like that. And so when we kind of, and now basically the beta was just completely free and anyone can use it. And then so once we officially launched the platform at the end of November, and then we had kind of like our free plan and our paid plan, we did a special promo. And if I remember correctly, I think we got like 300 paid signups or something, like just in that, or I think it was like 250 paid signups just in that first week. So, I mean, I'll mind you, it's like we have a lower price product, but still being able to kind of get momentum from day one, it helps quite a bit. And so, but that's the beauty of, growing the list and having a beta, making sure you're building what people want. Like, we try to be as strategic about it as possible, rather than just building something, putting it into the wild and kind of crossing your fingers.
Definitely. I think just following that, I mean, could you just tell us how much it is to have a membership with Snapper again, Chris, just for anyone that's listening?
So if you sign up for a yearly plan, it works out to be $10 a month. And if you're on month to month, then it's $15 a month. Perfect.
So I mean, everything you get so much value for what you're paying for. It's definitely a recommended resource of ours. So Chris, I want to jump back to when you was starting Snapper. Firstly, by that point, had you already left your full-time job, or was you still there?
Yeah, so basically when we were working on the business prior to Snappa, which was Bootstrap Bay, we had built that one up to a point where it was making enough money that we can quit our jobs. And then so we kept working on Bootstrap Bay for about a year, and then we got to the point where we essentially thought that, Snappa was a better market to get into. We kind of wanted to build a SaaS product with recurring revenue, and we're also way more passionate about, the problem we were solving versus what we're currently working on. And so we essentially used the profits that we were making from Bootstrap Bay and just kind of used that to fund the development of Snappa. And we just kind of focused all our time on Snappa and kind of put our other business on autopilot in a sense.
And Chris, just for any of our listeners that are maybe wondering, did you go back to your job after the year's leave?
No, fortunately I did not.
There we go. It was a happy ever after then.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Well, that's been awesome. You've had some great questions there. Obviously, right now, what we're going to do is we're going to jump into a rocket round. So this is where we ask you 5 quick questions that relate to you and your entrepreneurial journey and things that you use, sort of things. And then right after that, we're going to jump into the last few questions of the second round. Does that sound good, Greg?
Perfect to me, Brad.
Sounds good.
Cool. Chris, book, ebook, or audiobook? Which of them do you prefer using?
Me personally, I'm an ebook kind of guy.
And is there any particular ebook that you that really stands out to you or would help someone in the startup stages?
So I would say in terms of starting a business, there's 2 really good books. One is called Lean Customer Development, and that will really help you identify whether or not like you're solving a real problem and whether whether people need the solution enough where they're going to pay for it. And another great book is, which I mentioned earlier in the interview, is called Traction. And especially for someone new to marketing, I think it gives a really good overview of, different marketing channels that are available. And it gives a good framework for how to identify what channels you might want to focus and test and double down on.
Perfect. I think someone actually mentioned that book in the previous show.
They might have, yeah.
So yeah. Oh, cool. We got this. Could you just repeat the first one for us?
The first book is called Lean Customer Development.
Perfect.
Brilliant. Okay, cool. That shall be in the show notes for our listeners. Okay, so next question. Is there one particular app that you are currently using that helps you assist your daily jobs?
Other than your own?
Yeah, other than Snapper, obviously.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot that I use. In terms of like just day to day, helping me stay organized, helping me plan things. I really love Trello. That's been a lifesaver for me. And our team also uses Slack as a communication tool. So I would say, just in terms of like keeping ourselves organizing and communicating, those are probably our two favorite apps.
Brilliant.
Perfect. So we got that written down there.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Chris, what is the best piece of advice that you could give to a startup right now?
Best piece of advice. Well, that's a good one. I would say, well, it's two things, at least from my experience. Number one is I'm always a huge proponent of talking to customers. I don't think you can do that enough. And, validating your assumptions and as much as possible before building things that nobody wants. And for new entrepreneurs, I think above all, the most important thing is just to take action.
Brilliant. That's perfect. So another question number 4. If you could go back to being 16 years old, what would you say to yourself?
Well, obviously, I kind of got, well, depending on who you talk to, but I feel like I've kind of started out a little late as an entrepreneur. So, if I can go back to when I was 16, I think I definitely would have, started this earlier. I guess that's the only thing I would say to myself.
Yeah, take the jump.
Yeah, or maybe not. Yeah, well, so I mean, at 16 years old, like I think maybe it's not so bad anymore. But like when I was 16, right, in my head, my options were like the only option I had was to go to university, pick a good career with a well-paid job and do that, right? So, now I know that's really, there's just a ton of opportunity beyond just that. Like if you want to go to school and be a doctor, that's great. If you want to be an accountant, that's fantastic. But there's so much the internet has provided us with just so much opportunity now. I think there's so much you can learn from online courses and that kind of stuff. And so, I would just say to my 16-year-old self, like you can do anything really, and you don't have to follow the path that everyone else has followed.
Perfect. So, Chris, the last question of the rocket round, and this is a big one. I always love finding out this part from every guest. Who would you say is your biggest entrepreneurial idol?
I would say Rob Walling, and he's kind of been, one of the leaders in this whole movement of bootstrapping software startups. And it's kind of ironic because his latest project was Drip, which was the email marketing provider that we actually use at Snappa. And today there's just an announcement that they got acquired by Leadpages. So pretty interesting that the kind of bootstrap guy is now sold his baby, and I think he's going to be the VP of product at Leadpages. So I've definitely learned a ton from Rob Walling, and they have a good podcast called Startups for the Rest of Us, which is kind of geared at launching software products. And so that would definitely be my go-to guy to learn from.
Awesome.
That's one we haven't heard before, so that is brilliant. Thank you.
Greg's already Googled it.
Yeah.
I love hearing it because everyone has different views. Sometimes you get cliche versions. Everybody says that, like, so I don't know. Some people might genuinely like Steve Jobs, but you always sort of hear the main ones. It's sometimes good to hear ones that, I didn't know about this guy, so you learn things. Cool.
Right. So
yeah, I was just gonna say, in terms of like, I feel like Rob has had like the most actionable advice that you can kind of just run with today. So some guy like Steve Jobs, like just hugely inspirational, but the reality is, like, there's only so much that you can learn from Steve Jobs that you can actually go in and apply today, right? So yeah, that's kind of the way I see it. But having said that, like, his autobiography is probably one of my favorite books, and I'd highly encourage anyone to read it.
Is that Steve Jobs' autobiography?
Well, I guess it's not an autobiography; it's the biography, the one that was written kind of like right after he died or whatever.
Yeah, it's an amazing book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, highly recommend that. Definitely. Okay, so now we're going to go into part 2 of the questions. These questions will be about the tools and techniques that Chris uses that might help our listeners with their journey. Brad, did you want to hit us off with the first question within this round?
So, Chris, this is always an interesting one because we always get completely different responses every time. So, given the majority of people are online now, would you consider a website a necessity to start in a business, whether it be digital or traditional or local business?
I think it just completely depends. I know people who are, either consultants or a lot of people doing Facebook ads, and they don't have a website, and they're busy all the time, and they have more clients that they can manage. But I mean, if you're, let's say, building a blog or a personal brand, then obviously, like, you're absolutely going to need a website. So I guess the answer really is it depends. So but I mean, the other thing too, right, is like nowadays hosting is just incredibly cheap. Like, you can get hosting for $5 a month. Domain is $10, and then you can buy any sort of website theme and build a website within like an hour or two, or even use like a Squarespace. So for considering how cheap it is to build a website nowadays, like there's kind of no reason not to, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think with my theory on this, because I'm always sort of saying it, my dad's always been he's always been in traditional jobs, and that's always been his thing. He enjoys creating physical things. But I always say to him, just get a website, because what harm can it do? At the end of the day, a lot of people are always on their phone. For instance, sometimes I've driven down the motorway and seen a van on the side of the road with the big branding on the side of it, with the number and what they do, and all I've managed to catch is the name of the business. So instantly, you might go onto Google and type in, and if you can come up with a website straight away that's got all the contact details, a bit of a portfolio about their work, you've instantly got the trust, got the contact, and you can call them. Whereas sometimes, for scenarios like that, you might not have time to catch the number or where they are or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're like a brick and mortar, or you got like a store, then absolutely you need it. And today you definitely need a website 100%. And it's funny because I was having this conversation with a buddy of mine not too long ago, and we're talking about how the best marketers in the world right now are essentially all working for tech startups, and the competition is just so fierce because everyone's just so good at what they do. And we were talking about, how if you look at offline, like the brick and mortars and some of these offline businesses, their marketing is just absolutely terrible, like just awful, right? And so we were talking about how if you can get a really good online marketing guy, applying those practices to an offline business, they can probably just kill it. And so I would challenge people who, are in more of these kind of brick and mortar or traditional offline business. It doesn't mean that you can't use these, online marketing type tricks to advance your business. So I definitely recommend that.
And obviously, with the advancement of websites, we also have the huge burst at the minute with social media. Do you use social media for your business? And if so, which one? Or which platform are you using at the minute to scale your business? Which one would you find most effective?
Yeah, so when it comes to social media, it's really important to understand who your audience is. So, the people who are hanging out on Snapchat are going to be very different than the kind of people are hanging out on LinkedIn. So I don't really subscribe to the advice that you have to be on every single social media channel. I think you just need to be on the ones that your audience is going to be on. So for us personally, we are fairly active on Twitter because a lot of business and marketers are on Twitter as well as LinkedIn. So those are kind of the channels that we focus on. But, like if you're, for example, like if you're a fashion brand, then you've got to be on Instagram, like 100%. And, Snapchat's blowing up quite a bit right now. So like if you're kind of targeting the young crowd, I would definitely get on Snapchat. So, again, just a matter of figuring out which network is going to be the most valuable to your business.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And for me, I personally prefer Instagram the most because I prefer actually seeing visuals, even if it's visuals with a text. Because sometimes I love Twitter, but sometimes if you're looking for a feed and it's all text, it's quite hard to actually take in. And there's a sort of lazy cell in your brain that just says, I can't be bothered to read this. That's my opinion personally. So yeah, I agree. Instagram is spot on.
Yeah, Instagram's great, and I actually have noticed a lot of even like entrepreneurs kind of building personal brands on Instagram. And a lot of them will share like motivational quotes and that kind of stuff. And yeah, like just the visual nature of it, I think is really great.
Definitely. So Chris, a slightly different one, because obviously you guys have sort of built your own team up. So I suppose you've all had your own individual parts of work to do to build Snapper to where it is today. But what's your thoughts on outsourcing? Do you think that a lot of it could be something good for maybe somebody that's looking to go into a similar direction as you, but maybe hasn't quite got the full funding to employ someone, or what's your sort of thoughts on outsourcing?
So my thoughts, at least when it comes to like software and technology, is if you're going to be a software company, then I think that the software needs to be created in-house, because that's your bread and butter. That's what you're selling. That's what needs to be good. And when you're dealing with contractors, like, you don't know how passionate they're going to be, versus like a co-founder is going to be extremely passionate and kind of put his heart into it. And the last thing you want to do is outsource your SaaS product, and then your lead developer kind of leaves you, and then you're kind of screwed. Having said that, I'm a huge proponent of outsourcing. Like, we don't do our bookkeeping. We have some staff in the Philippines that helps us with a lot of stuff. But having said that, anything software related, we like to keep in-house. That's just my personal opinion. I actually have a buddy in my mastermind group who's pretty much outsourced almost all of the development of his product, and it works for him. So I think it's just, you're going to see, varying opinions, but, mine is that if you want to build a really good software company, you should try as much as possible to keep at least, the core piece of the technology. And I think you need at least one technical co-founder to kind of lead it.
And I suppose this kind of leads nicely onto another one of our questions. A lot of our listeners are probably not in the stages where they're able to hire somebody or outsource their tasks that they're struggling with. So, a lot of our listeners will be bootstrapping their business due to the lack of funds and time and just the general resources that they've got at the minute. So do you think it's better to bootstrap, or would you look at maybe investment funding, i.e. crowdfunding and all the other types of investments or ways to invest?
Yeah, I think for a brand new entrepreneur that doesn't have any successes under their belt, it is going to be extremely difficult to raise money without some sort of traction or some sort of prototype built or what have you. And so, I think when it comes, this is again just my opinion, I think when it comes to investment, I think you should try to get, as far along as possible before, like, it's when you, like, there's always going to be a point in time in a startup where if you, let's say, had an extra $1 million, that you can really scale the business and grow. And that's what you want out of your company. Then that's a great time to raise money, right? Because you have a plan to deploy it, and you know that money is going to go to good use. But if you have like just an idea and you don't have customers, it's not validated, you don't even know if it's going to work, and you don't even really have a business, you're essentially wasting your time trying to raise money at that point. I would focus instead on, building something, talking to customers, getting feedback, building a prototype, wireframing if you need to, and going from there.
Yeah, definitely. And I've heard, one thing I actually want to ask you here is because sometimes we get people entrepreneurs on the show that are more sort of personal branded, or maybe if they're life coaches and things like that. Whereas for things like this, like Snapper, it's an actual product. One thing I've heard somebody say before is that when they were in the startup stages of the business, what they'd done was they reached out to a lot of customers that they felt were maybe surrounding themselves around the sort of topic of what their idea was. And what they've basically done is they've asked them and said, look, if I was to create this product, would you invest into it? And if so, how much sort of would you be looking to pay? and they've basically based around that. They've actually got pre-orders before they've even built the products itself. So that's something that just occurred to me. Do you think that that's also another good way for someone that maybe hasn't really got the investment at a startup stage, but they can start maybe rounding up the heads to try and get some numbers together first, building a bit of a fan base, and then they can start focusing on creating a product?
I think that's a fantastic way. Actually, a buddy of mine just raised, well, his goal was to raise $25,000 on Kickstarter for a chef's knife that he was creating, and he's now up to $400,000 of pre-orders, which is just like fantastic. When you talk about people with personal brands like creating courses, I know a lot of people who won't start creating the course until they actually have a certain amount of pre-orders. And so, whenever you have this available, I would, highly recommend the strategy. There's going to be time, when it comes to software, and it might be a little more difficult depending on how complex the product is actually going to be. But the ultimate form of validation is someone, pulling out their credit card. And so if you can make that happen, by all means, I would encourage that as much as possible.
Brilliant. I think that has answered it perfectly, Chris. Thank you. And the last question that we always ask at the end of the second round is that if somebody is looking to start within your targeted niche, Chris, what should they be doing to launch from stage 1 to success? So, I mean, if you can talk about, how much money and time, how much, sort of tips and advice and things like that, what should they be doing?
So, I mean, software as a service could be pretty tough to just jump right into. And so, keep in mind that this is like the fourth business that I started. And so it's kind of been, several years leading up to this. So, having said that, when you're dealing with software, again, I probably sound like a broken record now, but I can't stress enough that there's just such a danger of building things that doesn't solve a real problem and that people actually aren't going to pay for. So, if someone is looking at building any type of software or building out a SaaS product, I think the absolute first thing that people need to do is talk to potential customers, read the book that I mentioned, Lean Customer Development, and make sure that there is going to be a market for what you're building.
Definitely.
That's perfect. Well, I think, to be honest, that probably covers a lot of things. And Chris, you've been awesome. The questions you've gave some great advice there. Even to us, and it's not even a field that we're particularly in, but already from the advice there, I'm sure we could probably go and start. Greg, what do you reckon?
100%. And again, we really do appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to come on the show to help our listeners, and not just our listeners, but us as well. So again, thank you very much. We really do appreciate it.
Well, it's my pleasure, and hope your audience gets a lot out of it.
Chris, just before we go, obviously the best way is to contact you on our resources. For example, the resources page on our website, Snapper will be one of the recommended resources to people, so you can obviously find it from there. But Chris, could you just tell us the best way people should be finding out about Snapper and where they should be going to?
Yeah, just head to our website at snapper.io, and that's the best way. And if you want, you can also link to my personal site, chrisgimmer.com, if anyone's curious to learn more about me.
Brilliant.
Perfect. Chris, been awesome having you. Thanks again for taking the time out to join us. You've my fulfillment has just reached its highest now that I finally got to get in front of the mic with you, and it's been great having you on the show.
All this pressure, I hope I've lived up to it.
Definitely, 100%.
Cool.
Well, that's good. I mean, it's my pleasure, and thanks for reaching out, and I hope it was good for you guys.
So then, guys, what an amazing episode it has been. Chris has hit us with tons of value that we hope you guys can take away and really learn something from. So again, thank you for listening. We really do appreciate it. But before we leave you, we just want to hit you with our new competition. We're currently giving away 1 year's free subscription to LivePlan, 5 free entrepreneurial books, and a Stage 1 Startup branded t-shirt with the winner's name on it. Brad, do you want to tell the listeners what they have to do to be able to be in with a chance to win these prizes?
Of course. So guys, all you have to do is subscribe to this podcast by clicking the subscribe button. then all you have to do is rate and leave us a review. This sort of stuff is important for us to try and get ourselves up there and in people's faces. Then all we need you guys to do is post a selfie on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook of you holding a piece of paper which says done, hashtag give me S1S, 1 being the number 1. Then make sure you use that exact hashtag, also tagging us in the picture, and you are good to go. What we'll do is we'll draw it up in a hat, and we will give you a date for when we will be releasing the contest winners and go from there.
So then, guys, it is literally that simple. And to make things that little bit more engaging, we will be shouting out the winner on a later episode so that we can see who's behind their smartphones, probably.
Yeah, definitely. All the notes will be in the show notes, guys. So if if you're struggling finding everything we've just said, go to the show notes. They'll all be there.
Again, thanks for listening. We really appreciate you tuning in to episode 4. We cannot wait to see you on episode 5.
See you then, guys.
Bye, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Stage 1 Startup Podcast. If you're looking to launch your own business idea, visit stage1startup.com for recommended resources and step-by-step guidance to help you succeed. Prepare for takeoff.